would seek to be separate, you will never be free. Be one, and you are set free. To do what you wish, go where you will, be what you desire to be. Our speaker today has helped the teaching of the inner Christ grow. She's a charter member of this organization, and she brings forth her love, her talents, her wisdom, and her grace. Please welcome our speaker today, speaking on forgiving, healing, and freeing our world, Anne Delamo.
Thank you. Are we okay with the sound?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Forgiveness, healing, and freeing our world. Tall order. If you look at the news, it's just like, you know. And one of the big secrets is the Rucat song. I kind of start treatments with that because it's hard to forget it. The big secret is, and in a way, it's kind of bad news because the world won't change unless we do. And I've observed this just from looking at stuff. First, we have to free ourselves, and then everything else follows. But then, I love this. There was a saying I heard about people growing and learning. I don't like change, and I don't like the way things are, which is a common attitude. I don't like it the way it is, but I'm not going to do anything about it. Do it my way. What happens to most of us is we grow up on the earth plane with our little earth brains where the horizon is really close. We get into attitudes, and an attitude is basically a settled way of thinking or feeling about something, people, places, and things, and it's reflected in our behavior, and it's very unconscious. And one thing that we do here is to recognize that and go about letting things evolve. So attitude can be a prison, or it can be a stepping stone. I've noticed root-bound plants versus the ones that aren't stuck in a pot and then expand. And the hide-bound, root-bound ones just generally don't do all that well. And then I also noticed that with people, that we become, and I've done it myself, where you just get so wound up in habits, and we don't even notice it, because we don't see ourselves as others see us, and we sure don't see ourselves the way that Spirit does. And these attitudes can become just like barnacles on a ship. I mean, you're under full steam, and how come I'm not getting anywhere? Because dragging all this stuff in the ocean along with you. And I have experienced that through a good deal of my life, and it took a real decision to not do that. So we have found that one way is forgiveness, and that's a big topic, so we're just going to get into part of it. But basically the definition is stop, release feeling angry, resentful, or just generally just resistant for real or perceived offense, flaw, mistake, or harmful action. And also not taking the anger into destructive action towards a perpetrator, or a lot of the times ourselves. We look at this from the standpoint of the individual, because this is where stuff usually starts. um, individual attitudes of fear and hostility become group attitudes. I guess we attract each other. And usually as a group won't change as a whole. It takes one person to start it, and then it goes from there. So that's one of the reasons why working on ourselves is very important, because it affects others. And you can have the other effect too. People just get in groups and they get more and more angry and more isolated within themselves. And sometimes they become a menace to society because they think everybody else is a menace to society. And we get all kinds of stuff and all kinds of imbalance and unhappiness, and everyone becomes aggressive and destructive, and it doesn't really qualify as self-defense either. We become afraid and then we do things that don't help. So this happens in our formative years. There's so many children who didn't have very good parents, and it shows down the line. It takes quite a bit more recovery, but it can be done. So how do we feel when somebody steals from us or lies or tells us, you can't live here because your skin is the wrong color? Or, you can't do this, girls can't do that. You're just a girl, you can't do that. Can't be an astronaut or whatever. Oh yeah, boys don't cry. There's one. Mm-hmm. You don't belong to our religion, so you'll fry in hell forever. And that sometimes seems to be the central tenet of a great many religions, not just Christianity. They kind of forget the part about, healing the sick. I read where Jesus really didn't want us to worship him, but rather just to follow him. So anyway, that's just another attitude, and it shows up in different ways. But if we're on the receiving end of this behavior, get a strong reaction. Well, what happened? Somebody died and made you God? That's how I always felt. Who is that? Who is that? To go around saying, and the reaction was as being afraid, getting mad at him, and even a desire to get even, like, don't get mad, get even. I remember hearing that too. So there's a cycle of revenge. Little petty, sneaky ones, and then just full out, I'm gonna get even, and people do it. I don't know. Who's read this classic tale by Alexandra Dumas, The Count of Monte Cristo? Now that's a story. The thing is that revenge stories are far more popular than forgiveness stories. It's just really great when the villain gets it in the end. And revenge has wonderful mood-enhancing qualities. It's almost like a drug. We're aware that forgiveness might be the better thing to do, but lots of the times in the movie, who wants to see someone turn the other cheek anyway? Not too many, and somebody did research on that, Communication Research Journal, and they found it. People really love the things. But the Count of Monte Cristo was about a man when he was 19 years old, and he was going to be the captain of a ship, and he had a lovely fiancée, and his life was just perfect. And his neighbor was jealous, and the treasurer of the ship was jealous, and it evolved through a really good plot that he got framed for treason, and they threw him in jail or in prison on this island, and he was stuck, and his whole life went down the drain, and his fiancée married one of the perpetrators. So he was kind of mad, and what happened was that he was in jail with a man who was a cleric in the abbey, and the abbey said, if you get out of here, I'll tell you where I have a treasure. So He actually, the priest died, and so the hero hid himself in the priest's clothing, because when people died, they just threw him in the ocean. So they threw the hero in the ocean, and he swam away, and he escaped. And over a period of 10 years, he plotted his revenge, and he did. But he also, to counteract that in his mind, he also did great good. He gave money to people, he had all this fabulous wealth, he disguised himself as the Count of Monte Cristo, and he proceeded to get even with the people who wronged him, and he was very clever about it. The only trouble with that is, here's some reasons why seeking revenge is probably a bad idea. Might not make you feel better. In fact, you might feel worse. Perhaps if you shot somebody, they've got a family at home that depended on them. That wouldn't be too good. It could backfire. They could return the favor to you, probably wasting precious time and energy. Maybe they wouldn't get it. Might be karma. Two wrongs don't make a right. And you could get caught in this endless revenge thing. Yeah. Things go on for generations. Feuds. And feuds turn into like wars that go on and on. Like one county doesn't like the other, and you see this in Europe, that things would just turn into world wars. And the worst part is that we could end up being transformed into the very thing that offended us. We'd be stuck root-bound in our own pot. So now, instead of one root-bound situation, you've turned into another one. So that multiplies. And stealing pieces of the souls of the other to try to restore the own pieces of your soul doesn't work very well. So the alternative that most of the great religions of the world have found is forgiveness. And Jesus was the master of that. At some intuitive level, we recognize this because we observe it in others. The trick is seeing it in ourselves. That's where it starts. Recovery groups make a huge effort at this. We take inventories, like just rigorous honesty, and it's very difficult, but inventories of, well, who hurt us? And who did we hurt? And whose side of the street is this on? And amends are made, and we walk through the forgiveness process, and it is a process. It's a practice. I'd like to say, presto, I'm done now. I can go on my merry little way. But it lets us break out of this pot into a greater, wider garden where we can grow and flourish and nourish ourselves. We can get our roots out of this boundary. It's continuous. It's a process. Because we're humans living on the earth, we're all root-bound to some extent. And the trick is observing it. And it would be impossible if it weren't for full spiritual power. This is the other little secret. Luckily, we have each other and simple, effective spiritual tools which engage this power. It's kind of like letting the clutch out if you know how to drive a stick shift. You can pop the clutch and zoom, or finding the switch and turning it on. And basically, this is what happens when we pray. One of the practices that we observe here and are observed by other groups is tapping into the source of spiritual power. We have that all within us, our center of divinity, our Christ self. And when we meditate, we immerse ourselves in that. And it's simple. And we're going to do it here. We also pray. We have an effective format for that. That was the RUCAT formula, recognizing God as all-powerful, unifying that, being part of the Creator, choosing what we would like to do, and also being specific and saying, or better, because sometimes our earth brains don't quite figure out all the ins and outs the rest of the universe sees, but we don't. We can do affirmations, inspirational readings, music, videos, podcasts. A lot of the world has gotten on board with this, and it's given the news and the situations, it's kind of under the radar, but it is making a difference. And we have fellowship, sharing with others on a similar path, and that's important because we can share with each other and support each other, because sometimes it just is it's just almost intimidating if you look at it. But then when we get around each other and we find out, like, oh, SDG&E, said, hey, you're paid up.
Yeah.
Scotty went to the doctor. That's a miracle. I know that one. I don't want to go there. He's resisting. And so that it shares and it makes things better. And when we do these things, if we meditate and we treat and we do affirmations or whatever we can do, or stay in touch with that greater part of us and others as well, and use our fellowship and help others and do the things that will be helpful to us, it sends out little ripples of light. And these too are beneath the radar. But in turn, it transforms and harmonizes all the static. And I think people just, with their thought forms, do generate a signal. And now we're going to have, in November, 8 billion people on the surface of the earth. And that can make for a lot of static. And it just generates more signals. And through meditating and our treatment, we can get a clearer clarity. Clarity is another term for serenity too, by the way. And it helps us to not get caught in the echoes of everything. And with social platforms, oh my gosh, sometimes I look at Twitter and it's just like somebody yells and then all these voices come back. No, that's not true. It's amazing. But they also post a lot of cat videos and good stuff. So, you get to choose. But we do heal ourselves. And you see people that they're just attractive, they're filled with light, and when things go sideways, they go, oh well, because we're learning to forgive ourselves, and I find that's the hard part, so I work on it a lot. You learn from mistakes, you bless the process. Sometimes it's kind of hard, but what helps me is I see you guys do it, and I know somebody who had a real forgiveness test, and they had a family relative, and they just tried to forgive this person. They couldn't do it, so they just asked Jesus, please help forgive, and she will tell you about it if you ask. And then one day, this person that she just teeth clenching prayers just called up and was normal and friendly, and things were just like fog in the sun, pretty much dissipated, and there was communication. So that's where we can use our higher power. That's where we can use our contact. That's what actually moves the universe, or not moves the universe, but moves us so that we can take benefits of the blessings that the universe has. I guess we're just gotten too used to rolling in the dirt or something, but so we learn not to do that anymore. My father had a saying, and it was kind of gross, but he says, I hope I smell it before I step in it. I heard him say that, and my mom would go, oh, but it was true. Anyway, he was very cut to the chase kind of a guy. So that helps us to get through the day and avoid stuff before it happens. And in doing this, it catches on with other people. People like that. They really do. They sense love. we all sense love. And it will clear the way. It'll open up doors that you weren't imagining. You can bang on one door and a whole bunch of other ones open. And as we look back, you see enormous progress. You see people walk in the door and many times they're like, they change. They just become different. They become more of themselves, losing all the masks and the defenses and acquiring a fluidity and a softness and expressiveness that we all really deserve. And we're finally figuring it out. And RUCAT, God, higher power, affirmations, meditations, these are tools that we can use. And they work. They work. And things happen. And that's what I think the world needs. And it does spread. It really does. And sometimes when there's changes, there's a lot of resistance and a lot of drama. And I think our country and the whole world is going through that right now. But if we stay steadfast and work on ourselves and bless others, we'll solve our problems. We'll be in the solution. We have the tools. We have the motivation. We have the consciousness. We're willing to grow. We're willing and ready to scrape off the barnacles and keep sailing. So I guess that's about it, and thank you for your time and attention.